Okay, so this week I told you guys that I would teach you how to make your own bead design templates or otherwise improve upon the skills of these basic paper bead techniques. So I've provided some templates for you. And even if you don't necessarily like the exact outcome that they make, they can give you an idea of what you might want to try making for yourself or otherwise expanding on. So just a reminder, we've got our wide cylinders, we've got our medium cylinders, we've got our narrow cylinders, right? And we've got our cone beads that are wider on one side than the other, and our oval beads that are wider in the center, and our little orb beads that are pretty close to being a little sphere. And then we've also got our dumbbell beads, which have two wider edges and a straight middle. And then the peanut beads that go from narrow to wide to narrow to wide to narrow. So these are all different ones that you have templates for that I've started teaching you how to make. But if you want to try making something yourself, you're more than welcome to. So the first thing that I want to tell you is these are made with the scrapbook paper, so it's a little bit thicker paper, and I may or may not be giving you answers to an assignment. If you're paying attention to the words I'm saying, and you've already taken a gander at the assignments. So here's a bunch of oval beads. So it's the same template as this one, but because I used magazine paper that's so much thinner than the scrapbook paper, the beads end up being a lot narrower. Now, I really like the variety of colors and patterns that happen when using the magazine paper to make my beads, but I don't like how thin it makes my beads end up. So if you are in the same boat as me and you like part of it, but there's something that you need to change, I recommend using your glue stick and gluing together two sheets of your magazine paper. So I have here, I'm just picking up my beads again, so I can put my example back in the area of viewing. Da-da. I have this page here that I really like how these colors look, and I think that they're going to make some really pretty beads. And I took my glue stick and smeared all the way over it. And then I took my ruler and pressed along the page like this as it was drying to make sure that the whole page was stuck together. So it effectively makes one thick page for making beads. Now, as with always, I want to make sure that my designs are on the opposite page or opposite side of the page rather than on the front, because I don't want my ink to show up over here. So I'm going to flip it to the back side of this page to start showing you how to make a design. Now, the other thing that I want to point out is I really like these oval beads, but I wish that they were a little bit thicker in the middle. And while the paper thickness will help with that, I'm also going to extend the length of the template. So this template was about 5.5 inches long, so if I lay my ruler here to the edge of the page, it was about 5.5, 6 inches long, okay? I'm going to use this entire paper length, and that looks like we've got just under 8 inches, but this part isn't the important part. Now the thing is, I want to make a lot of the same kind of bead, and I'm going to make them all that oval. So what I'm going to do is on this side of the page, this outer edge here, I am going to measure, and it looks like it's 10, almost 10.5 inches tall. So every 1/2 inch, I'm going to make a little mark, starting at the top, because that's where my favorite of the colors show up. So every 1/2 inch. If you want your beads to be wider, you can make them, 1 inch wide like our wide cylinders. You can make them narrower, like our narrow cylinders, but I personally find that 1/2 inch is a really nice length, and I know that when it's put together as part of a necklace or part of a bracelet, it gives a good amount of flexibility. So when you have those really long beads, they work better as like accent pieces because otherwise they don't bend very well. And while the smaller beads look really pretty, I'm sure you've noticed they take a lot of work. So here I have my every 1/2 inch, and now on the other side, and I know that this, I lined it up at 10.5. I'm going to move it 1/4 of an inch to the right. So I moved my ruler, so now it's 1/4 of an inch offset. And I did that because that's halfway between each of these 1/2 inch markings. So if you were to make each of these an inch wide, you would need to put this over 1/2 inch. But because I made the bottom part 1/2 inch wide, I'm moving the top part over 1/4 of an inch. But, oh, note, pay attention, be careful. Just because I'm starting it 1/4 of an inch over doesn't mean that I'm continuing to make 1/4 inch marks. I'm still going to make marks every 1/2 inch, but now instead of being at the whole inch or the 1/2 inch, I'm going to be making them at the 1/4 inch and 3/4 inch markings. So right here, I have my paper lined up now to be at 10 3/4. So I'm going, or excuse me, 10 1/4. I'm going to make my mark at 9 3/4 and 9 1/4. 8 3/4, 8 1/4. And I'm going to keep going, again, making my marks every 1/2 inch. They're just now offset just a little bit. So this is ultimately the main reason why you guys have a ruler as part of your kit, because I wanted to show you how to make your own bead templates. Now, how are we going to make these marks connect? One thing that you may want to pay attention to is you'll want to make sure that these get closer to the edge than I got them on mine. So I'm actually going to come in here and reline up so that this is at the actual edge, so that the edge of the magazine is resting on the ruler here. Try to hold it nice and tight, don't let it move. This is also part of the reason why we do it on the back side of the paper, not the front side, because we don't want to mess up our nice page. So I still have my pretty paper over here, and it's going to look nice. So now we are going to do the diagonals, where we are going to connect each side of the page. So we're going to connect this corner to this line, and this line to this one. So I'm going to go corner to edge, and I'm actually using the camera to line up here because otherwise I can't quite see over the ruler. And then keeping that edge lined up here, lining up that ruler, giving yourself a little bit of space for whatever material utensil you're using, right? Now, I'm noticing that this has a straight line across. So this is going to end up being a cone bead because this is a right angle rather than being a oval bead where it has the angle that opens out. So what this means is that even though I lined up at the right spot over here, I still ended up making this mark in 1/2 inch in instead of 1/4 of an inch. So I can go back through and redo my markings, or I could say, you know what, I'm going to make a bunch of cone beads. That's up to you. In my case, I'm going to very, very quickly here go back through and make more markings. And I'm just going to put a marking in between each of these. If you do the same thing I do and need to correct the same way, then my only word of warning is that you may want to use something that's a different color than the original one you were using. So if you're using colored pencils to make these marks, use a different colored pencil, because then you can keep your markings straight. Because now I have all these markings to choose from, and I may or may not want to keep it that way. So this first one, I am going to, oh, I didn't put a mark right here. Ha ha. Okay, so this first one, I'm going to leave it as it is. So this first one is just going to end up being 2 cone beads, but that's perfectly all right, because I can still use them as part of my design, or I can just skip them and not use them later. But now the second one, I can really show you the beauty of making your own template. So again, this is my corner. Now this is my 1/4 inch marking and my other line. So I'm lining up, don't mind me. And I'm going to keep my left side anchored and move it down so I can connect this side. Now I'm connecting the same spot again, so I'm going to leave this side anchored and move it down. And here, sometimes if you have your markings the same color as the paper, it can get kind of tricky, but you'll get kind of the feel of how much you need to move the ruler each time, and that'll help you as well. But you can see how much quicker this kind of technique can be than using the templates, but it's all up to you. So I'm going to, without being on the video, go through and make the rest of these, and this will make me a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, times 2, so 38 beads. At 1/2 inch, that'll make me 19 inches of length. So if I were only using this kind of bead, I could make a necklace out of 1 page. But chances are you're going to want to use a variety of different beads. The other thing that I want to show you is how to make more interesting shapes than just the ones that I've provided. And that one, or that idea, right, isn't so different from everything else. I'm looking for a kind of plain colored page, right? So let's say you want something that's like the dumbbell, but instead of having just 2 sides, you want one in the middle as well. So you could conceivably mark off 1 inch, and I'm just going to use the whole width of this page again. And as usual, I'm going to start with the flat edge because that makes my job so much easier. So I'm going to start at 1 inch, and I'm going to measure 1 inch up on this side as well. So because I have things on my table here, I'm going to start at the 11 at the edge of the page and make my mark at the 12-inch spot. This will give you that little flat area to start rolling your bead, and then it'll be the separation area. Now I'm going to line up so that the number line on my ruler is straight with the edge of the paper. If there's lines on your page that you can line up with, that works as well. But here's where I'm going to make my big long line for the edge of my bead. Okay. And now is where we get to decide how this end part looks. So if we were doing like a dumbbell bead that had 3 pieces, you might want to divide it into 5, but 5 doesn't really go well as far as the markers on an inch. So I'm going to do the outer 2 being a little bit wider than the inner one. So I'm going to do 1/4 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch. Actually, I'm going to do all 3 of them 1/4 of an inch. So now we'll just have a little bit of space in between each one. So at that same spot down below where I made that mark before to denote where my flat area is, I'm going to mark 1/4 of an inch, space, 1/4 of an inch, space, 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to connect these lines. I would actually recommend doing the opposite markings down below just so you don't accidentally end up cutting these spots. Here we're lining up, here we're lining up, here we're lining up. Now if you're using pen like I am on magazine, your pen is likely to get rubbed around, but this can kind of give you an idea. You're going to have this long strand, this long strand, and this long strand. So when you cut it out, you'll have 3 areas that you need to twist and glue and whatnot. But instead of just having those 2 wider spots on your bead, you'll end up with 3. Hopefully this gets you thinking about what you can do, how you can push yourself, make things that are more interesting than what I've given you. You're in no way required to make things as complicated as this, but in your assignment, you are being asked to try new things. So try making a bead like this. Or try making a bead like the ones I showed you on here, where you're making your own template. I will know that they are different than your other ones because they're going to end up being a different size. All of your template beads end up being the same, but when you make something new and unique, they end up being a little bit different. With that, I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you again later.